the debasement trade as the most popular trade of the year. I think people are going to pile into that so they can show their clients at the end of the year that, yes, they saw this coming. They were in Bitcoin, they were in gold. So I think we're going to see strong flows there. I think you're seeing an acceleration of ETF flows. When we combine those two things, I think the price goes up substantially. We have deliberately not revised our forecast because we still think it is in play to get there. Whether we'll get all the way there or just directionally there, I'm not sure. I'd love to know Ryan's take, but I'm still.
When Donald Trump issues a dramatic or extreme statement, financial markets often react impulsively, swinging sharply before eventually stabilizing as emotions subside and the rhetoric cools. However, in this particular instance, his tweet was unusually forceful, sparking fears of a full-scale trade war and triggering widespread anxiety about global economic stability. As a result, investors rushed to offload stocks and risk assets, leading to a temporary wave of panic across markets. Yet, analyst Hougan's perspective remains clear and measured. The reaction is largely exaggerated. While short-term volatility is inevitable, he argues that Bitcoin and the broader crypto market are relatively insulated from such geopolitical shocks. In fact, these digital assets could even benefit as investors seek alternatives to traditional markets during times of uncertainty. If you found this analysis insightful, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and enable post notifications so you don't miss future updates on market trends and crypto insights.
One more thing, it's not just crypto yahoos like Ryan and I that are saying we could see a melt up in Q4. JP Morgan is talking about 165K by the end of the year. Standard Chartered, a stuffy UK bank, is talking about 200K by the end of the year. People are doing that because they're looking at the imbalance between supply and demand and crunching the numbers, and that's what they're finding. But try to find me a stock that a major bank thinks is going to double in the next 3 months. Analysts don't put out those sorts of recommendations. The fact that they're doing it in Bitcoin suggests to me that it's not just Ryan and I being Bitcoin bulls. It's actually sort of a reading of the fundamentals that this is still something that could easily happen in them. I think we're on that track. It would help if we got a little bit more aggressive on the rate cut outlook, if it looked like the Fed was going to be more radical about letting the economy run hot while cutting rates. I think we could get that sort of signaling. It would help if we see more sovereign wealth funds allocate. But I think that debasement trade and the unlock of platforms like Morgan Stanley and Wells Fargo to buy Bitcoin and how that correlates to flows, I think that alone might be enough. But I do think if we start to see the Stephen Moran force driving down expectations for interest rates, I think that would be an extra catalyst, a cherry on top. There's a relentless bid for investment into everything related to stablecoins and tokenization. Mm-hmm. Ryan and I have both been on the road recently. I've been in Chicago and New York this week. Next week, I'll be in London and Barcelona. Every TradFi investor that's looking at crypto, as interested as they are in Bitcoin, what they really want is a way to hop on the stablecoin and tokenization train. The primary ways they're doing that, there are three. One is ETH, the other is Solana, and the third is crypto equities. We're seeing a lot of inflows into our crypto equity ETP, but that train is leaving the station. I think the question there is whether the Clarity Act goes awry and doesn't make passage through Congress. If we do see sort of momentum on the Clarity Act reappear and rising expectations that it will get through Congress, I think that trade's going to absolutely explode, and we'll see much higher ETH and Solana prices and huge inflows into those ETPs. So that's the other big story in crypto, and it's just relentless and overwhelming from the TradFi side. So we've been running this fund as a private fund and then a sort of GBTC style trust for almost 8 years. It's the top 10 weighted by market cap, screening out things like meme coins and some controversial from a regulatory perspective coins like BNB. So it's a lot of Bitcoin, a lot of ETH, a lot of Solana, a lot of XRP, a lot of Chainlink. And we think there's going to be huge demand for that. For a crypto native investor, that seems like a very boring investment because we all have our own fiefdoms and turfs. We're Solana or we're ETH We like to fight about these things, but for a traditional investor, they index everything. They index stocks, they index bonds, they index real estate. Guess what? They're going to index crypto. So I do think that will get significant flows that will lift all assets if and when the US government reopens and then the SEC sees fit to allow our ETF to list. So we're really hopeful for that.
Hougan now estimates that the bill has roughly a 55% chance of passing. However, if it fails to move forward, the setback could weigh heavily on the broader crypto market, with only Bitcoin and Ethereum likely to remain relatively unscathed thanks to their established regulatory clarity. In contrast, smaller altcoins could face renewed uncertainty and downward pressure. He also clarifies a common misconception about exchange-traded products, ETPs. They don't generate demand on their own. Instead, they amplify existing market momentum. In Hougan's words, ETPs function more like a superhighway than a spark. They accelerate capital flows when enthusiasm is already rising, but they can't create that excitement out of thin air.
Also am very optimistic on ETH. I think it's well positioned. It's the leader in stablecoin and tokenization AUM. But in 8 years of operating full time in crypto, I've never quite seen a setup like the setup for Solana. The three things that I think are going to lift it substantially higher are you have this massive unrelenting interest in stablecoins and tokenization, and Solana has one of the best and most interesting solutions there. You have the rise of Solana digital asset treasuries with charismatic and well-spoken leaders like Kyle Samani, who will be on CNBC talking about Solana ad infinitum. And then you have the expectation that we're going to see a lot of ETFs launch. When we've had these things line up before, you had Bitcoin ETFs, Bitcoin DATs, and rising interest in fiat hedges, and the price tripled. You had Ethereum ETFs, Ethereum DATs, and rising interest in stable coins, and we're from 1,500 to 4,000 plus. And then you think about the fact that Solana is a tiny asset. It's 1/5 the size of ETH. It's 1/25th the size of Bitcoin. Just a little bit of flows into it because of those things I called out. There could be a real supply demand crunch there. And I think the price could double or triple in relatively short order as institutions make their first allocations into this space. Again, I've never seen a setup quite look like this. Yeah, the risk is I was 90% confident we were going to get it. And now I may be flirting with below 50 or around 50. The two reasons for that, you mentioned one, which is the government shutdown. They literally can't work on this because the doors are closed, because the government's incompetent. And the second reason is we've seen the Democratic counterproposal in the Senate to the Republican bill in the Senate. And the Senate is where all the action is right now on the Clarity Act. And the Democratic proposal is a non-starter. It's aggressively anti-crypto. It feels like it was penned almost by Elizabeth Warren. And so there's not an easy path to reconcile the Republican version with the Democratic version. They're on two very opposite sides, and it looks a bit like the Democrats want to make this a difficult political issue. If it doesn't happen this year and we bleed into next year, it probably gets even harder. The way it's resolved, I think, is you're going to need lobbying pressure from crypto and lobbying pressure from the traditional finance industry to encourage those Democrats to move along. I'm probably still at like a 55% chance it gets through, but I do think it's a real risk to the market. If we see the Democrats digging their heels with their current approach, you could see expectations sour for this, and that would be bad for everything except for maybe Bitcoin and Ethereum. Everything beyond that, I think, would suffer from a regulatory perspective. Oh, it's a great question. I think the right way to think about ETPs is not that they bring flows, it's that they amplify flows. So in retrospect, looking back at the Ethereum launch, why did they not bring flows into ETH? Well, literally no one wanted to buy ETH between July and whatever, maybe for about a year, right? For the first year that they were in the market until maybe April 15th or May 1st of this year. That's when ETH got its momentum back. We had reorgs at Treasury, we had new technical advances, and we had the stablecoin trade. So what that tells you is they don't bring flows on their own. You can't launch a Bitcoin Cash ETF and suddenly we're all talking about eCash again, right? That's not going to happen. But if a asset has a good story and a good reason for flows, then the ETFs are like a super highway that let traditional investors pile in alongside retail investors. So I think it's going to be pick and choose them, right? Do I think Solana will get flows? I absolutely think Solana will get flows. Do I think Chainlink will get flows? I think Ryan is right, but early. I think the narrative will roll onto Chainlink after people digest Ethereum and Solana. Would Hype get flows? I think Hype would get flows. Will Litecoin ETPs get flows? Boy, I would be surprised. So think of them as a flow amplifier and not a way of inciting flows. That's the right way to think of these ETPs. So there'll be winners and losers. But it's good to have them because it does make the flows flow faster when people are excited about them.